welcome back to Mind Trick Media. We're going to go back and do another book episode for you guys. The book we are doing is Master and Apprentice by Claudia Gray. Before we even get started, if you're just tuning in and don't know, we listen to the audio books of these, like the books that we read. And the Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan voice were really good. I think they were really good. Like when it starts and he's like, Obi-Wan, and then he's like, yes, Master.
I had that written and then I took it out.
Yeah.
But because I couldn't remember exactly what it was in the book.
Dude, it was so good.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God. Like, I don't know. I just had to say that. It was really good.
I was going to start by saying this is going to be a long episode. So buckle up, strap in, put your helmet on. I think I've done that before, but I don't remember. So this book is... It was very hard for me to take notes on this book. He didn't take notes, so, because it's just, there is a lot going on. There's a lot of perspectives. There's jumping back and forth of characters, timelines, eras. And so, like, there's a lot of things in this book that are super, like, unnoticeable, I would say, to some people. But so, like, in some of the notes, and we're going to talk about through, like, we're going to finish talking about something, and then we're going to, like, maybe, like, over-explain it a little bit more, just for depth of what's going on. Because there's so many things that these books can do, because the first 6 movies were all out when these books came out. So they can, like, double connect to a lot of stories that happen, so...
Yeah, also, before we get started with the book itself, I mean, like, the story, I mean, it's in it, obviously, but when, like, Qui-Gon's, like, saying the Jedi Code at the beginning, I actually really like that in the book. And then it's, like, it's almost like a meditative, like, meditation session he's having, where he's meditating the Jedi Code, and then all of a sudden it just blaster fire right then and there. So, getting it started, Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon were on this mission at the planet Teth, and yeah, that's where, like, it jumps immediately from the meditation session to this. They are, like...
They're jumping into a battle, and basically they're infiltrating a facility that has Gamorrean and human guards. And if you know anything about Gamorrean guards, you know typically who they're hanging out with, and it's the Hutts. So, like, very early on, you get, like, this perspective jump in this book, too, because you're getting a lot of, like, Qui-Gon's thoughts, and then you're getting, like, in the next chapter, you might get Obi-Wan's thoughts about the exact same thing. So, a lot of this is going to be jumping back and forth. You're going to have to try to, like, pay attention. We're going to explain as best we can, but, like, a lot of the things jump back and forth, like, very rapidly. So, they're having this altercation, and basically, Obi-Wan's in a pinch, and, I mean, it's a real chance that he could die. Like, they're surrounded, and basically, like, there's a specific part, and it shows very early on the kind of tension between Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, and it's because Qui-Gon basically tells Obi-Wan, like, hey, look out for the door, or take care of the door. And what he meant was, don't let anybody come through the door and protect the door. And what Obi-Wan did was he slashed the control panel and completely shut the door. It's just a straight miscommunication, and then you get, like, Qui-Gon, like, immediately thinking to himself, like, he's way too old to be making these kind of mistakes. Like, I know that's what I said to do, was to take care of the door, but that's not exactly what I meant to do.
And then, yeah, in Obi-Wan's perspective, he, like, says to himself, you could have just told me that. Like, Obi-Wan's thinking, like, you could have just explained it a little bit better. Like, you didn't have to say, get the door, because, I mean, like, from Obi-Wan's perspective, getting the door was closing the door. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, you just see, like, they're just not on same pages whatsoever when it comes to literally anything.
Yeah, so this is kind of just, like, an opening of the book. It's not really, like... It definitely is a scene that, like, gets brought back up later on. But basically, Qui-Gon basically has the ability to kill the Hutt. And the person who is kind of, like, the handmaiden-esque, does all the dirty work business for the Hutts, is a character named Thurible, and he's the major domo of the Hutts. And basically he like is in charge of like trading, in charge of like in this specific thing, he's in charge of discipline, where he disciplines the Gamorrean guards and the human guards because they attacked the two Jedi, which was their job. Their job is to protect the hut. But so basically, we get to where Jin wants to look into the planet once they get back to Coruscant. So, and this is instantly the book starts jumping. So the book jumps immediately to characters by the name of Rahara Wick and Pax Manifer on Pax's ship, the Merricks. So these two characters are easily explained as jewel thieves. So basically, they go to worlds, they illegally take gems, minerals, rocks, and they sell them to other planets who don't have that specific thing. So like, they'll go to Alderaan and they'll steal like granite, tile, quartz, and they'll steal this and that, and they'll take it to a planet like Tatooine, or they'll take it to a planet like Teth, or they'll take it to a planet like Hoth, and they'll sell these items that these other planets don't have. So it's basically a black market selling and trading.
So these two characters, they get brought up like early on in the book, like you said. It kind of takes away from like the Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon part of the story, and it gives them a little bit more backstory because I feel like their story is not as brought up as much. So Rahara grew up a slave, and Pax grew up with like C-3PO unit droids.
Yeah, his story's a little weird. So his entire like family and a group of like settlers were on a ship, and it was overtaken by pirates. And so he hid in one of the little compartments, and by the time he comes back out, there's no one there.
Yeah.
And then years later, or I think it might be a couple years, he had like rations and stuff, so he wasn't gonna like die. But a couple years later, it gets like taken in, and these C-3PO units basically take over the ship, getting it to a different part of the galaxy and like stuff, and they find him. So basically, he was raised by like a bunch of C-3POs. So you can immediately know exactly how that went.
I mean, yeah, the way he like portrays himself and talks, and he thinks he's like way smarter than everybody else because like protocol droids know basically everything.
They're protocol.
Yeah, and he almost lives as if he is one.
Yeah.
So
we get to the meat of what's going on with them, and so Pax comes up with the idea that they've gone to all these little planets, they're stealing like little minerals that don't sell for too much, and he decides that they should go try to find kyber crystals. And basically Rahara tells him that he's fucking insane because the Jedi, like at this point, obviously, like this is what we think of the prequels with Qui-Gon and them. The Jedi have a hold on kyber crystals. They're the only people that use them for anything. Mm-hmm. And that's basically where Pax is like, exactly. That's why they're so valuable on the black market. We only need to get a couple, and it's big money.
Right. So after we get a little bit of their backstory, and like they're like, we're gonna go look for kyber. We jump back to Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, and Qui-Gon's like thinking to himself like, why is Obi-Wan like still super childish? Like, he's been with me for 4 years now. He chose him to be his Padawan at 13, and he's 17 now, and he's still like acting like a child. He can't like in the situation they had where he was like, get the door, he didn't understand. Like, he feels like he's just acting out as if like he's super young still, and he feels like he should be further along in his training than he is.
And one thing that Qui-Gon said specifically that I thought was like super like explanatory to it for you guys is that with a quote, he says, years through their partnership, they still remained out of sync. And I think that's something that we've talked about before, and me and him talk about a lot, where for how good of a Jedi Obi-Wan is to become and how good of a Jedi Qui-Gon is, it doesn't really make sense why he chose him and then why they're out of sync.
Yeah.
But that's just how it was. And Obi-Wan felt very different. Like, he felt bad sometimes. He felt mad. He felt mad. He felt rude. He felt anger towards Qui-Gon, where
he felt like a burden.
And that's the other thing, too, is like sometimes he would have that, Qui-Gon's not the right fit for me, and he doesn't know how to teach me. but instantly would all put it back on him. And he was very like detrimental to himself. Like he would have that first feeling like, well, Qui-Gon did this, and it was like, well, now I understand that he meant this, this, and this. I'm the problem.
Yeah.
And yeah, so
he gets to a low where he just completely convinced himself that he is 100% the problem, which is definitely not the case.
And we're going to learn a lot more about that as we go through this. So immediately we jump again, and we're going to be meeting new characters.
Yeah.
We jump to the planet of Pygel. Pygel is going to be the main chunk of this story. It's going to take place on Pygel a lot, in Pygel's moons. Here we meet Rael Averross. He is the former apprentice of Count Dooku before Qui-Gon Jinn. We also meet Darren, who is the captain of the Royal Guard on Pygel. And then we basically get a little background of how Rael Averross was this great Jedi, but he has fallen away from his Jedi ways. He's using anger and aggression to deal with conflicts in his life, and he's having legitimate like relationships in like a sexual manner, which is not very Jedi-like. So
no, he definitely steps away from it so much. But we'll learn more about that as we keep going.
Yeah, we'll learn why Rael is here, what his purpose is. But basically, to sum it up in the beginning, they tell you that due to Pygel having a very young princess, her parents have passed away, and she basically became, the royalty of that planet at a very, very young age. I can't remember if she's 7, 8, 9. She's very young, and when he got there, she is now in her teenage years. But she is a princess by the name of Princess Fanry. It's a little bit weird of a name, but Averross is the Lord Regent of Pygel, which basically just means he is in control of her decisions. Obviously, he listens to her, and they have like a committee of people, but he basically is the ruling lord of the planet and helps her make the decisions, and one of his biggest jobs is to protect her. And obviously he's a Jedi, so he's kind of put on like guard duty, and he was sent by the Jedi Council.
So we take a big jump again. We're on where Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon are heading home from Teth. We get a lot of Obi-Wan perspective during this time, where he was reviewing the fight like in his head and stuff like that, and was being conflicted with him being the problem versus Qui-Gon being the problem, and then he puts it on himself. And then he starts to think to himself about how Qui-Gon kind of like has his preferred things to learn about within the Jedi, like archives and stuff like that, and studies and stuff that are like that are completely different than everybody else's. Specifically, like the ancient prophecies, the way that Qui-Gon like views them as he kind of wants to almost have it like he's worried that Qui-Gon's gonna fall in too hard to where he thinks like this is how like life is gonna happen.
So what he means is like there's a weird point with the Jedi with prophecies, because this is before anybody knows about Anakin,
right?
Clearly, but
Anakin's
like obviously
is he born by now?
He would be born, yes.
Yeah.
But basically, Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon, and then Dooku and Rael were kind of the only people paying attention to ancient Jedi prophecies. They were kind of thought of as like Jedis who were trying to see the future. They weren't letting the future come. They were trying to dictate their future. But they've written down these prophecies that are so like detailed, but so like you could basically read them in different ways, and people understand them differently. And what I like about this part of the book, and this is the prophecies end of this book, is what I think makes it as good as it is that you like I think we ended up mentioning some prophecies in here, but they talk about prophecies and you can like correlate them to what actually happens in Star Wars.
Mm-hmm. There's multiple different ones that like seem to. There was multiple in this book that worked with the story of this book.
Yes.
And then on top of that, they have like the chosen one prophecy and stuff like that they talk about. But the worst part for Obi-Wan was like seeing Qui-Gon like go against the Jedi code, and like he just couldn't understand why he would go against the code. And then on top of that, like Qui-Gon was a successful Jedi going against the code, and Qui-Gon was like Obi-Wan was super conflicted with that idea that you can steer away from the Jedi code and like be successful doing the right things and stuff like that. And Obi-Wan's really conflicted during this time about stuff like that.
Yeah, it's a point where Obi-Wan maybe is starting to think that the Jedi code isn't perfect and that you can still be a good Jedi without following the code, but he doesn't understand why it's kind of a Qui-Gon method in a way. So, but then we immediately jump again. So
Yeah.
this is what I was kind of talking about. So like we jump back to Pax and Rahara. And Pax is explaining, kind of in his own thoughts to us, his relationship with Rahara. And he explains that, like, while they are business partners, they also have this weird relationship because, like, he explains one specific night where he opens a bottle of wine, they're growing super close together, and he just doesn't understand human connection. She basically, it's exactly what you think it is.
Yeah.
Bottle of wine's open, late night, there's a
Yeah.
candle lit. Things might happen, but he fucking ruins it. So
Yeah, I mean, with him being like, he basically is a protocol droid.
to an extent, which
To
I
an
don't know if we
extent.
mentioned, they're both humans.
Yeah.
They're both humans. So this is what makes it very weird.
Right,
And like,
So they're like, like trying to progress in their relationship kind of during this night. And
she is.
Well, right, she is, and he just can't even like think about it.
Yeah,
like he doesn't understand
he doesn't have the idea of his own emotions, and when he does, he goes into shutdown mode because he doesn't know what to do, and he
Yeah.
does not have the ability to care about other people's emotions. Where, as if you've seen Star Wars, you kind of get that from C-3PO, where he always makes a comment like, "Why don't we just do this?" And it was like, "Yeah, because people would die. People don't want to do that. All that." He just doesn't think about that.
So also during this time, they like talk about that, and then they end up actually arriving at the planet where the Kyber crystals were supposedly at. It actually wasn't the planet as they had originally thought. It's actually the moon of Pygel, which is where the main part of the story is going to take place. So they actually get to Pygel's moon where they think all the Kyber is being like just at.
And we also get an important scene here with Rahara because we told you that she was a slave. I don't think she was actually born into slavery. I think she was taken as a child. And basically what they do is the specific company that owned her were like miners. And they mined into planets, taking rocks, minerals, and all that other stuff. And when they arrive at Pygel, they see that there is a ship there, and it's of the Zerka Corporation. And Zerka is the company that owned her. So basically, the reason she's such a perfect fit for what Pax is doing is Pax was doing this kind of on his own because he's super like an elegant person who loves the nicest cloth material, the nicest rocks, rubies, diamonds, paintings, and art. She basically became a geologist because she had to understand what rocks were while working for Zerka. So we immediately jump again.
Yeah, so we get back to where Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan have reached back to Coruscant, and obviously after a mission they have to go talk to the council and stuff like that. So Qui-Gon has to report everything during their mission, and then he also has to go through the talk where him and Obi-Wan still are not on the same page. And
this was not the first conversation.
It was not the first conversation. They made that very clear in the book, and it was a hot topic for this situation because they're like, you guys have always been on different pages and stuff. It's starting to become a problem because Obi-Wan's not progressing because I don't know if I should say that yet because we kind of haven't made it that far yet. But not progressing, Qui-Gon's not helping. Yeah. So he's basically talking to the council. Um, yeah, they're possibly talking about reassigning him a new master.
Well, no, so it's not that that's they. It's kind of been like a whispering thing, and that's what Qui-Gon thinks they're gonna do. They think that they're gonna pull him away because it's just not working, and Obi-Wan was such a high member of his class that they don't want to waste each other's time. But instead of reassigning him or having a conversation about reassigning him, the council kind of goes to left field here, where they offer a Jedi Council spot to Qui-Gon Jinn.
Yeah, they had, obviously we're discussing it beforehand, obviously, but they get to a point where they're like, we like that you can bring a completely different idea to the Jedi Council and have a different opinion on what we might do, and we need more opinions. We need a bigger mind on the Jedi Council, and they really wanted Qui-Gon to join to be able to take that role.
And so instantly Qui-Gon was kind of like shocked and was like tempted to take the position, but then he slowly realizes that as it's been done before, it probably won't be the same. Of if Qui-Gon joins the council, he probably won't be training Obi-Wan anymore, and
Yeah.
Obi-Wan would be getting reassigned.
Yeah, he has a thought to himself that this might actually be a better way for Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan to split up, because it's an excuse for him almost, and at the same time, like, he's also worried about it too, because as much as they like butt heads and stuff like that, he has a great deal of care for Obi-Wan, but he's like, this could be an easy way out, but at the same time, he's like kind of messed up about it. He's doesn't really know what to think, and he basically is like, I would really like to meditate on this before I give you an answer for like a long time. He didn't really like say how long he wanted, but he said he wanted a good amount of time to really think about this.
You ready? Jumping again. Okay. We basically get thrown into a meeting that's happening on Pygel, and they kind of have this like council in a way where a bunch of members, almost kind of like a cabinet for like a presidential cabinet, where there's the princess and then she has her cabinet members. So basically this is where we meet a Zerka sector supervisor who I know that kind of like Zerka sector supervisor. Basically she is in control of the sector that Pygel's in, and her name is Merrick Cole. She Zerka is, and this is where we start to kind of understand more of like Pygel's background, where Pygel actually has had Zerka like corporation mining on it for centuries. And yeah, it kind of, we get thrown into this discussion, and they're talking about this group called the Opposition. And so what's happening is there's this giant plan for Pygel that we'll get into. I don't want to spoil it too much, because I like doing the book kind of in order. It kind of gives you an idea of like not just a story, but how the book throws things at you to where you're always wanting something, and then they immediately go, okay, we're talking about a different character now. But basically they're talking about this group called the Opposition, and they are basically opposed to how the government is working currently and how Zerka is so involved with Pygel. At the exact moment they're having this meeting, a station on Pygel's moon was bombed, a Zerka station. So we immediately kind of get like, we have to go see what's going on. And then, boom, we're jumping back to Obi-Wan.
Right back to Coruscant. So we get a perspective from Obi-Wan. It's a thought in his mind that he's basically having, but he's doing like his studies and stuff, which I'll say in a second. But he is sitting there in the library looking over like his like studies and stuff like that, and he's thinking about like some of his friends that he has within the Jedi Order. Like one of his friends that's named Pre, and her masters, they share love for animals and learn about the animals and stuff like that. And then you got one of his other friends named Jape. They talk about their adventures they go on all the time, and they study astrophysicists together and a bunch of stuff like that. And then it's him and Qui-Gon learning about prophecies. basically reading poetry. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so we kind of get like an interesting part here where Obi-Wan kind of asks Qui-Gon, "Why do we listen to the prophecies?" And Qui-Gon asks if like this is a weird back and forth, so it's gonna be hard to kind of like explain it. But so Obi-Wan asks Qui-Gon, "Why should we listen to the prophecies?" Qui-Gon then immediately asks if the prophecies define what would happen in the future. And Obi-Wan says, "Isn't that what a prophecy is?" And Qui-Gon was like, "Well, yes, but you also understand that a prophecy is made in the old Jedi mystics. Like, it was made by the old Jedi mystics in their time period. So they, like, we learn about these Jedi mystics, and basically there were jobs that Jedi do, which we kind of don't get that much of in the prequels and in the original trilogy. But like Jedi had jobs to do. Like we just explained that like one of the masters studied animals. So if there's anything that was happening with an animal on a planet, they could look at that Jedi and be like, okay, you know everything about this. Or the other one, they studied stars and planets. They were astrophysicists. They studied astrophysics. And there used to be these Jedis who basically their entire job is that they meditated and slept and saw the future, or at least what they think is the future, and they would write down these prophecies, and they would predict what. And this is where Qui-Gon's trying to explain that like the prophecies may not be correct because they can only explain things that they have experiences of. It's kind of like how you can't imagine a place you've never been to unless you've seen a picture. But when you go to that place, it's not like the picture, obviously. Like, just for an example, like the Great Wall of China. Like, you've never seen the Great Wall of China other than in a picture. But if you're standing on the Great Wall of China, it's probably a completely different feeling.
Yeah.
But basically what these Jedi were doing is they were saying, okay, in the future, this could happen. I mean, you guys know what prophecies are. The same as theories and all this other stuff. Mm-hmm. So... But what this does, though, is by learning the prophecies, it actually, like, helps current Jedi learn about past Jedi in, like, a weird way. At least the way Qui-Gon sees it.
Yeah.
That's obviously not how everybody sees it because no one else looks at the prophecies.
Well, Obi-Wan's also not looking at it that same way either.
Obi-Wan's looking at it as everything that he does is it's very literal. This will happen when this happens.
Right, so Obi-Wan's looking at it like, oh, so... we're already like setting the future up and we know how it's going to play out. We just got to like find this being the chosen one, or a little sneak peek, the Kyber that isn't Kyber.
But this is another thing where it kind of shows, how do I want to phrase this? So like Qui-Gon sees the prophecies as an interpretation. So when the following events happen, people don't... I don't know how to explain it really well that makes sense for them. It's what they say is exactly not what they say, which is kind of foreshadowing what is happening between Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan.
Yeah.
Qui-Gon is saying one thing because he means in a general expanse. It could mean multiple things. And Obi-Wan is taking it and doing something, and it's not what Qui-Gon wanted.
Yeah, and Obi-Wan kind of goes on to say, like, isn't looking into the future, like, a path to the dark side?
And that's what I was going to bring up, too. That's why I was like, I knew I was going to bring up something, and I can't remember. And it also foreshadows the fact that you are not supposed to change what happens.
Right,
and
so...
a lot of Jedi look at prophecies as someone will become the chosen one because they want to be the chosen one. And we'll get into it more because I think it's mentioned later on. But like there are Jedis that we see in the prequels that want to be the chosen one, even though that they kind of fit the prophecy. They don't 100% fit the prophecy.
Right.
But in their own interpretation of it, they do. So go ahead, though.
Yeah. So, like, Obi-Wan is, like, talking about how, like, isn't seeing the future, like, bad because you can, like, know what's kind of going to happen and you can either try to fix it, control it, and he it could lead to like aggression and stuff like that, because if you're not like happy with how a certain way is going to go, or like how it's predicted to go, it can lead to the dark side. And Obi-Wan is very conflicted with that idea, which is also why he can't understand Qui-Gon right now, because he's just so like trying to take it so literal, because he feels like Qui-Gon is, but at the same time he just can't understand what Qui-Gon's trying to say.
And I loved a part where they basically say like it can go like Qui-Gon admits that there are many paths to the dark side, but it becomes the choice of how far you go, and how you go about the interpretation and what are your actions. But so then what?
Nothing. I was gonna say, instead of taking a jump forward, we take a big jump backwards. Basically, we jump backwards in time to where when Dooku picks Qui-Gon to be his apprentice, and it's the day after Qui-Gon's picked. Count Dooku's like feeling the confliction and stuff within Qui-Gon, and he's like what's wrong? And he finally admits to his fear of not becoming a Jedi and not becoming the person that Qui-Gon wants to be. And to me, I found that very interesting, because the Qui-Gon that we get to see, like, besides like right this second, is like he is so like, let the will of the Force do this, let the will of the Force do that. But this is like, he's like at a very young age, he's like forcing it to happen.
Yeah, he is in almost a constant state of fear after he was picked, because on top of Dooku's accolades, he has to impress Dooku and learn from Dooku, but also he has that fear of that, like, if I'm not good enough, like, what is my life? And I think that's a really good scene for me to look back when we did the Padawan book, because Obi-Wan has similar thoughts. Mm-hmm. He kind of has that, what would I do if I wasn't a Jedi?
Yeah.
And so Dooku, like, has a nice scene with Qui-Gon where he acknowledged his intelligence of fear and his intelligence, how he can use it to go into using the Force, and how he should be afraid of the Force, and that is a good feeling. And you kind of see already how Dooku is, from this point on, where how Dooku is very different than other Jedi. So we jump back into the future, and Qui-Gon is summoned to the Chancellor's office for a mission for him and Obi-Wan. So this is honestly kind of weird the first time I read it, because I was just like, okay, he just was like supposed to be being a council member, and like they're sending me on a mission with Obi-Wan after we just had a rocky mission. Mm-hmm. But basically they come in, and the Chancellor is explaining that there's a mission that they need to go on, and they need to resolve some issues on a planet called Pygel. And there are issues being caused by this group called the Opposition. The Chancellor explains that the Opposition used to be a dancing and performing group, and they randomly turned violent and started bombing areas of Pygel and doing these outrageous acts. But basically, this is where I was getting to of what the point of Pygel is that they are trying to open a hyperspace lane. And it'll be from the core worlds, so you have Coruscant, your biggest core world. They're going to be making a hyperspace lane that goes from Coruscant all the way to Pygel and into Pygel systems. Mm-hmm. And you can go ahead if you want.
Yeah. So that's basically like what he said, like what's going on at Pygel. But the Chancellor like acknowledges like the poor timing of this mission, because of Qui-Gon being asked to join the council, and Obi-Wan was not aware. Qui-Gon did not get to have that talk with Obi-Wan yet, and you get to hear a perspective in Qui-Gon's head. He's super upset because him going into this room, he didn't even know if the Chancellor even knew.
Yeah.
And oh boy, was Obi-Wan pleased about that.
Yeah, it's a weird timing because like they were just like arguing in a way,
And then
and the next thing he hears from a different person is, "Hey, congratulations on being asked to be join the council. Hi, Padawan that you haven't told yet.
yeah.
How are you doing?"
Um yeah, and even from an Obi-Wan perspective, he was also thinking to himself right when this was starting up about the new mission is that he could prove himself on this mission, and then he hears this news and he's like, come on now, I just want to be able to prove myself, and I feel like I haven't done that.
Yeah, so yeah, Qui-Gon, like he said, was kind of cursing to himself in his head because he was going to tell Obi-Wan, but he just didn't know how to tell him. But basically what happens is the Chancellor holds up Qui-Gon, and Obi-Wan basically, out of respect, and even other apprentices, you kind of wait for your master. But when the Chancellor was like, "Oh, Qui-Gon, I need to talk to you," Obi-Wan bolted. And yeah, so another part that we kind of like skipped over a little bit is that part of the reason that they're going to Pygel is that there's this thing called a governance treaty that's supposed to be being signed, and basically what it is that Pygel is currently a monarchy. They have a princess, and they're going to be switching to a constitution. So it would have a representational parliament that would handle governmental business of Pygel. And they're doing this because once that hyperspace lane is open, they kind of explained too that like the hyperspace lanes to Pygel were cut off during the Great Hyperspace War, and including Pygel and a ton of other planets just have not had access to the core worlds because there's not just a hyperspace lane. You have to like jump target to target and bounce around, which is very dangerous for most people.
Mm-hmm. So going back to the Obi-Wan thing, he was waiting at the door for Qui-Gon, and then Qui-Gon was held back, so Obi-Wan decided to dart out the door. And a thing for Obi-Wan, like we did talk about it in the Padawan book, he likes to go through the basic forms of lightsaber combat to like calm himself down, make himself feel better and stuff like that. So he actually went to the Padawan dojo to be able to practice his lightsaber forms, and Qui-Gon ends up finding him, and they kind of go at it for a minute.
Gets snippy.
Yeah. Yeah, Obi-Wan, by that, like, they just kept going at it, and like, why'd you only train me in the basic forms of lightsaber combat? And then...
Yeah, this is... You want me to go?
I mean, I keep going. In Obi-Wan's head, he came to the conclusion it was because Qui-Gon never even wanted to finish his training. Like, since he got the invitation, he was already conflicted with the idea of him not like wanting him to be his apprentice anyways. And then with the seat on the council coming up, he just completely is going down the idea that Qui-Gon never even wanted to finish his training, that he was going to get casted aside anyways. And
I think this is a powerful scene to the story.
Yeah.
Because you have all this, and like you said, Obi-Wan came to the conclusion that Qui-Gon just... And he said this out loud.
Yeah.
He basically was like, you didn't want to finish my training. And Qui-Gon takes a second and then, like, replies to Obi-Wan saying that, like, you never saw the reasons for the choices in training, and maybe that's why we'll never just work out. So, like, he kind of, like... Obi-Wan kind of opens the door for Qui-Gon to finally give him an answer, and Qui-Gon slams it in his face and walks away.
I mean, he also gives him like a riddle kind of too. Basically saying that you never saw the reasons for this. And right now, Obi-Wan like doesn't understand what he means. We get to it a little bit later in the book, but Qui-Gon kind of challenged him for his thoughts, and Obi-Wan shut it down real quick because he's like, oh, he's talking like I don't even know, like a prophecy again, like a poet or something, and like he was done with it. So yeah, Qui-Gon just left him.
Yeah, he basically leaves him with the Force sometimes figures out what is the best for you, and walks out. So then Qui-Gon sat in his quarters, and in the middle of the night, it was dark out, and the only light in the room being his data pad, Watch the unfolding of Rael Alvaros and his Padawan's final mission. So, as we kind of stated, Rael Alvaros was Count Dooku's first apprentice, and the only thing we've kind of told you is that he is on the planet Pygel. He's being this Lord Regent, but we don't really tell you why, and we're getting ready to. So basically, Rael went on a mission with his Padawan, and Qui-Gon is watching this from a data pad. It's kind of weird, like they have like instant replay of like fights. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like watching like film for a sport, but during this attack, Rael's Padawan was hit with a slicer dart. So if you don't know what a slicer dart is, because I kind of knew what it was, but this kind of explains it a lot better. It basically your brain is just taken over, and you can't control what you're doing. And so basically what happens is his Padawan gets hit with a slicer dart, and she turns and she goes after Rael Alvaros.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, in the moment, it was such a like heated battle that was happening that Avaros's first reaction was just to cut her down, just end it. The council ruled that it was for the safety of others, and he put more lives in a safer place than just his Padawans. Yeah,
and this was such a sad part. Qui-Gon is explaining that you can see the Padawan's face, that she knew her master and could feel him in the Force, but she couldn't do anything about it and couldn't control her actions. And then Rael cuts her down. But so Qui-Gon believed that this was entirely Rael's fault.
Yeah.
Rael made very bad decisions on attacking and how he attacked and just the way they went about the battle. And he believes that Avaros's Padawan's death was in his own hand.
Yeah, Avaros was a very aggressive Jedi. He was kind of like Anakin in a sense when you went into a battle. He kind of like was very aggressive. He may or may not 100% be on the Jedi code with what he does. And he thinks that Qui-Gon thinks that Rael led her down this path. And when it happened and then she turned because of the slicer dart, it just... Yeah, Qui-Gon thinks it could have been handled so much better, like pre-mission, and it wasn't. He blamed Rael for this a lot.
And then we get another really good scene. During this, he gets a hologram call, and Yoda is contacting Qui-Gon, and he basically is talking to Qui-Gon about the mission and explains that he wants Qui-Gon to try to contact Dooku. And at this point, Dooku's already left the Jedi. He is the Count of Sereno. And so he basically wants him to contact Dooku to learn more about Avaros and learn more about the mission that they're doing. And during this call, we kind of get this weird, like, this was a surprise to me. Like, it makes sense based off of what we know of the prequels, but it was surprising that Yoda reveals that Qui-Gon had not wanted Qui-Gon on the council. That was not Yoda's decision.
Yeah.
Yoda simply, like, allowed the other council members' opinions and choice of Qui-Gon to happen. He didn't think Yoda fit Yoda didn't feel that Qui-Gon fit what they wanted in the council. And it, like we kind of mentioned earlier, the others and Qui-Gon kind of believed that the reason he was being chosen was because he was different. He thought outside the box. He used his will of the Force over the code to make and decide things. And Yoda basically tells him that he's like, I don't care for you for that. He was like, I don't want that in the council. And you kind of get this feeling of like Qui-Gon feels exactly how Obi-Wan feels right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's such like a good scene because of that.
Yeah, so after this, I don't know if it's like the next day or whatever, but they're basically heading on their journey to Pygel. And Obi-Wan was avoiding Qui-Gon. He was helping the crew out, doing protocols, and he was talking to the pilot, trying to learn about the ship and stuff. He had an obsession with that for a while. Like, I feel like a lot in this book. Every ship that he was on, he wanted to learn about it.
I think something super funny about Obi-Wan is that the first time we kind of hear him talk about flying is in the second movie.
Blast, I hate flying.
And he talked about how he hates flying in the second and third movie. Yeah. But what people forget, too, is in the first movie, who flew the ship that they were on? It was Obi-Wan. Obi-Wan flew Padme's ship. The ship from Naboo. Yeah. And what people don't realize is that Obi-Wan loved flying. To a certain point.
Yeah, so
he doesn't love the way Anakin flies.
Yeah. After it's been a while, Qui-Gon finally is able to talk to Obi-Wan and talk about Rail. And Obi-Wan had already watched the same footage and stuff that he had watched the night before. He was trying to learn as much as he could about who Rail was. I don't know if Obi-Wan hasn't even met Rail at this point. And yeah, they were talking about basically the death of Rail's Padawan, and Qui-Gon basically expressed to Obi-Wan that he disagreed with how the council handled it, and Obi-Wan was like taken back from that. He was
openly disagreeing with the council.
Yeah, and he couldn't even fathom the fact. Like, we've had these issues with Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon in this entire book so far, but he couldn't even fathom the fact that he couldn't even agree with that. And it was like, it just started causing all the other stuff again. So basically what happened on the council is they kind of gave Rail a pass, and it was mainly because of him like being brought late to Coruscant. And he was 5 years old when he was brought, and Obi-Wan was shocked about that because he thought he was one of the older ones, and he was brought at 3.
Yeah.
And
this is an interesting scene too because of maybe some outside of this book events that just happened in Star Wars, but yeah. So basically, we have at a certain point that the Jedi kind of only take people who are super young.
Yeah.
And being 5 years old was like crazy at that time, which this is before, like 20 years before Qui-Gon.
Mm-hmm.
About 10 years before Qui-Gon. We'll say that. At least. They're at least 10 years apart between Qui-Gon and Rail. Probably more.
Yeah, I'm not 100%
on
that. But yeah, I mean, like he's saying,
before Anakin, we're talking like 50 plus years before Anakin.
I mean, yeah, he's also... This basically foreshadows like Anakin's late arrival to the council, and like having the attachments that he has. He remembers his mom, like Anakin was 9. Like, yeah, just the attachment that he's gonna have, the approaches he's gonna have to the way he lives and his attitude and everything, and how he handles like having a Padawan.
And I don't know if this is mentioned here, but I'm just gonna mention it anyways. In this, they talk about how Rail does not dress like a Jedi. He doesn't don robes. He dresses like super like ripped up clothes. He's dirty. He doesn't like clean himself. Like, he dresses how his parents in his home world like acted.
Mm-hmm.
So we then jump again.
Yeah.
Back. We're jumping to Qui-Gon being a Padawan, and he is heading to a planet with his master, Dooku, and they're heading into battle. And upon arrival, Dooku headed out to a Jedi that he's going after, and we find out that it's Rael Averross, where the two embraced each other. And
well, for a second in Qui-Gon's mind, he was like a little bit of like kind of afraid. I feel like he said that at one point, like he was like afraid to meet him, because he thought he would be completely different than he was.
Well, so I think that's a little bit after, but like, so like what he originally thought was that Dooku like stormed out of the thing and went over and like hugged
Yeah.
Rail, and Qui-Gon was very confused because
Yeah.
he was like, Dooku's not a hugger. Dooku doesn't embrace anybody. What is going on?
Yeah.
And yeah, so then we kind of get to your point too, where Qui-Gon was like, oh, Rail's going to be just like Dooku. And he is not.
Yeah.
Dooku's nice, neat, tidy, clean, super prolific, and only says exactly what he wants to say. And Rail is not like that. Averross then offers companionship to Qui-Gon, actually, if he ever needed it. So, like, if Qui-Gon ever needed help sparring, or if he needed help with books, which Rail wasn't great with, but you ever needed help with any work or anything, or typically more fighting stuff, force abilities and stuff, that Averross would be there. And he basically explains that when masters have multiple Padawans, older Padawans kind of help out the new ones, and basically gave Qui-Gon the openness to always come ask him anything that he needs. So, you want me to keep going?
Yeah.
All right, so we then jump again. We jump to Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan heading to Pygel. And there's this weird thing that they notice instantly when getting into kind of Pygel's orbit, is that they have this tradition that they've always done for like centuries and millennia, where people who live on the surface want to experience like a zero gravity. It's this weird like tradition journey that they go on. And basically you get into what we would almost consider like a hot air balloon, and you go up into space, experience zero gravity, and then you fall back down to the planet in the hot air balloon. It's a ship, but it kind of resembles a hot air balloon. Yeah. But what happens is a random solar flare ends up just hitting one of these vessels that looks like a hot air balloon. There's tons of people in it. And Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan go to like help out. They're like, "Oh, we need to help them. Like, they could die." And out of nowhere, this small craft launches an anti-plasma shell shot at this vessel, and like stopped the plasma from destroying the vessel. And after that, the zero gravity ship was then beamed into the Zerka ship with Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan. And they basically go in, and this is where they meet Rael Averross. Well, where Obi-Wan meets him. But so, upon seeing him, Obi-Wan was kind of confused and looking at Qui-Gon, because this is where it comes in where he kind of looks funny. He doesn't cut his beard. He didn't shave his beard. He didn't cut his hair. He's dirty. He's not wearing Jedi robes. And
yeah, Qui-Gon looks at it and can't really like fathom like this is a Jedi. Or Obi-Wan, sorry. Yeah, Obi-Wan was like, this is not what I thought Rael was going to be.
Yeah.
So they get introduced, you know, this kind of awkward for Obi-Wan. He, like, Rael's Rael. He's fine. But, like, Obi-Wan's being awkward about it. He did not take it, like, the same way. It kind of reminded me of the meeting with Rael and Qui-Gon, but it was not the same. It didn't, like, Obi-Wan's reaction to it was not the same as, like, Qui-Gon's reaction to it. Mainly because Obi-Wan was thinking about, like, the hollow footage and stuff like that, where he was like, yeah, this guy killed his Padawan. Anyways, but yeah, so they meet each other, and then Qui-Gon basically tells him that he was invited to join the council.
Obi-Wan tells Averross that Qui-Gon was, because Qui-Gon wasn't going to tell him.
Oh yeah, because there's a like, I don't remember what is said exactly, but he talks about like him being his master or whatever, and then he like is like, not for much longer. He got invited to the council.
Yeah, and basically, I think Obi-Wan kind of realizes with the footage that he's seen of Rael, and knowing the little he does about Count Dooku, that those three of Count Dooku, Qui-Gon, and Rael are kind of very different Jedi than most people, and they've kind of never been listened to. Obviously, we see Count Dooku the most clear, where he leaves the Jedi because they don't listen to him. They don't listen to that they're being corrupted, that they're that they're becoming complacent with their place in the galaxy. They're not actually saving anybody. They're just stopping bad people from normal crimes. They're not living up to what they could be.
Right. And then, so Obi-Wan tells him that Avaros is like also taken back. He's like shocked. He is like, the Jedi Council must be really opening up if they're inviting you to join the council. And he also like weirdly implies that they should contact Count Dooku.
Yeah.
To talk about it. And
yeah.
I'm like, I thought that was very strange.
I mean, it just shows how good of a connection that Rail has with him, and that Rail was different and Dooku embraced that he was different. And Rail always like loved him for that, and why he kind of like doesn't exactly respect the other Jedi, because they don't accept him for who he is. Mm-hmm. They want him to become this thing that he's not. And so, like, it's weird because he instantly, like, what I got from it was, like, hey, like, maybe we could finally have a say in what the Jedi do. So
Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan end up going with Avaros to meet the princess of the planet and the planet leaders and the monarchs and a bunch of different people know what's going on. They met Fanry. It's an interesting name. Like, I feel like the letters
Princess
should be
Fanry.
Yeah. You say it like that, it makes it sound better saying it. But they go meet Fanry and meet her at her throne. They meet Captain Darren and one of the
new character.
Yeah. And then another new character, they meet Orth, which is a monarch of Pygel.
Yeah, she's basically like what we would consider like an advisor or a senator, or like a constitutional senator, not like a galactic senator. She's a senator of that planet.
Yeah. So they meet each other, and then Obi-Wan suggests, due to the circumstances and the danger of the princess, to postpone what they call the hunt. The hunt is a tradition on Pygel where the...
Do you want me to explain it?
I mean, you can if you want.
So basically, it's an ancient tradition where the new, like, crowned rulers of Pygel, so in this case Fanry, they go on this thing called a hunt, and it basically shows their worthiness. Mm-hmm. So, like, I mean, you can apply this to anything else. Like, if you become a knight, you have to do this. If you become... I mean, really anything. You want to become a police officer, you have to go through academy training. Like, it's anything like that. But so basically, the hunt is that they would go out and they would search for these animals, and they had to hunt one down and kill it, and they had to kill it all by themselves. Mm-hmm. And basically, Obi-Wan is saying, hey, you know those traditions that you do? We might not be able to do that because of your safety. Yeah. And they all go, whoa, who the fuck are you?
Who's this little kid telling us what to do?
Yeah.
So yeah, they kind of talk about that briefly. They don't really talk about it a whole lot.
No, we talk about it a lot more later on.
Oh yeah. And so the next day, Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon go to take a ship to the Pygel moon to try to figure out what happened the previous day, like try to learn some stuff, see what's going on. They came across a signal that they were like seeing, and they found two humans by the name of Pax and Rahara. They're in their search for their kyber crystals, and they found a crystal that where they thought the kyber crystals were, they were not kyber crystals. They were crystals called colon crystals. Colon, how do you pronounce that?
Colon crystals.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah. Like coals and colon crystal.
Yeah, they are almost identical on a macroscopic level, but on a micro, they are very different. I can't remember the value is like minimal, isn't it? It's like nothing.
So they don't really know what it's worth. They just know it's worth so much less than kyber that honestly Pax just doesn't care anymore.
Yeah,
this is a waste of a trip.
Yeah, he was like, we could have went somewhere else and got something like better. Like, yeah, I don't know if they ever even say how much they were actually like worth or anything. If they were even worth much.
We get to a point where they talk about it a little bit.
All right.
But so basically, after a discussion about the colon and the kyber, Qui-Gon asked them for a favor, and he asked them if they could... Basically, this was kind of like I know that you guys are jewel thieves, and you need to help me or I'm going to tell somebody. Yeah. And he basically is like, I need you guys to help me find some terrorists. And that's what he said, but then I kind of terrorist is a little much, so we're gonna call them the opposition.
Yeah.
But so Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon left Pax and Rahar for the night and headed back to Pygel. This was on Pygel's moon.
Yeah.
Upon a further conversation, Avaros and Obi-Wan begin to understand why Qui-Gon was using Pax and Rahar to find the terrorist, and he was kind of proving to him and Obi-Wan that just because you do something bad, you're a jewel thief, or you do this, it doesn't mean that you're a bad person. And the way he phrased it, because it's going to be a lot better than me, good people can do bad things. And so Obi-Wan then brings up the ancient prophecies, which all three of them kind of know a lot about them. So it's a conversation that kind of seemed normal at the time. Obi-Wan brought up the Kyber that isn't Kyber prophecy. And you kind of mentioned this earlier.
Yeah.
And basically what the prophecy says is that when the Kyber that isn't Kyber shines forth, the time of prophecy will be at hand. And so this will get broke down a lot more and explained better. But basically, the Kyber that isn't Kyber shines forth. What they mean by the time of prophecy will be at hand is that the prophecies that we know of will kind of be at their starting point. So I'm gonna explain it better because I don't want to spoil it too much. But basically, this is foreshadowing the future to come. And if you know about Star Wars, you know about prophecies, you kind of understand what I mean.
So we get to the next scene where Qui-Gon is having kind of like a nightmare. He thinks it's a nightmare, at least. He's dreaming about the orange. So the crystals, like, they have like an orange glow to them when they're like, yeah.
So like typically when we see kyber crystals, they're clear, and then when someone picks them, they're blue, green.
Yeah.
I guess they couldn't be purple. They only have minimal people, but
yeah. So the orange crystal that he's seeing turned red like Sith fire, and he hears a bunch of screams. And then he sees white tiles. He sees this glorious ceiling that he's talking about or visioning, and he saw blue tiles and a blazing lightsaber over Princess Fanry, and so he hears somebody yell, "The Sky Keeper," and he
basically is hearing a lot of screaming and shrieking, and he basically sees a lightsaber slash downward.
Right.
And someone in the distance says, "Even the Jedi can fall." Yeah. And then he snaps awake. And it's kind of weird because Qui-Gon had a dream about kind of the Sith in a way. He has this dream about Sith fire, the fiery glow of the Sith.
Yeah, he just can't even imagine why he would dream something like this, because like the Sith have been extinct for 1,000 years, and he's like, why did I have this dream?
So basically he isn't kind of in the talking place with Obi-Wan right now, so he immediately goes to see Avaros in his room. And Qui-Gon, who is accustomed to the temple, they don't really care about personal space. And so he just barged into Avaros's room, which it's not unusual for a Jedi. But he walked in on Avaros and a woman who we learned a little bit earlier. Her name was Selby. She was just a random bartender on the planet. And they were in bed together. Like, they were in bed together. Not bedtime. They were in bed together.
And Qui-Gon basically is like, have you lost all of your ways?
Yeah.
And it was a really tense moment for a second.
And the next part I wrote, it's kind of a weird part because we don't get tons of explanation, but Qui-Gon asked Avaros if he had lost all of his ways, and then Avaros brings up that Qui-Gon had once had love on Felucia, which is a planet, but we don't really know what that is. We just know that Qui-Gon, I guess, at one point fell in love.
Yeah. And Avaros obviously is defending himself, and he's like, one night sleeping with somebody doesn't mean you love somebody or it forms an attachment at all. Yeah. And he's like, I had a disturbance. was seeing this in like while I was asleep, and Albert's like, you literally came in here because you had a bad dream. It was very funny, but obviously it wasn't a bad dream. It was like seeing the future.
They don't know that yet.
Well, could be.
But he goes from calling it a dream to calling it a vision.
Yeah.
And Averos thought it was very comical and non-serious. And then as soon as that happens, immediately they hear a scream from Fanry.
Yeah.
And immediately Averos bolts out of the room.
Yeah.
And when they arrived, Averos asked what happened, to which Fanry said that the alarm went off and she saw someone out her window.
Yeah.
And lodged in the window was a slicer dart.
Yeah. Obviously, if you remember from beforehand, a slicer dart is the reason why Averross's apprentice was like kind of went off the rails a little bit. Hey, his name's Rail. That's kind of funny. But the slicer dart was placed to obviously, well, Qui-Gon had this thought in his head. He was like, it's very obvious that somebody was trying to get to Rail at this point and like get him emotionally unstable for Fanry, because Fanry kind of is Rail's like second way out.
He
kind of
which
talked about
we kind
that,
of
yeah.
explain throughout the book that Averos is very defensive towards Fanry, and you kind of start to openly see that he may be using her as kind of like a, I already fucked up my Padawan, let me not ruin this girl's life, even because she's already had such a bad life. We then jump again. We are jumping to when Qui-Gon was sitting in Dooku's quarters as a Padawan. He had just reached a year of having that title, so he'd been a Padawan for a year. And Dooku let Qui-Gon like do his homework in Dooku's quarters. So it was kind of a little bit weird. Qui-Gon kind of just liked being in that atmosphere, and at some points like liked the company of Dooku, even if he was just doing homework. And in comes Rael Averross, done with that previous mission. And he starts talking to Qui-Gon. He asks what he's studying. And Qui-Gon says that he's doing a report on theosophies. That's right?
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
Theosophies. And Rael asked Qui-Gon if he could change his topic. Because Rael did not like that topic. And Rael said he could show Qui-Gon something worth studying. But I thought a funny part was that Qui-Gon was like, I chose that topic. And so basically, Rael was like, I'll show you something that's better and worth studying. And so off to the archives they went, looking for the Holocron of Prophecies. And Qui-Gon just started reading them and reading them and reading them and just couldn't stop reading them. And I quoted this, so he's reading and reading and reading. Only through sacrifice of many Jedi will the Order cleanse the sin done to the Nameless. The danger of the past is not the past, but sleeps in an egg. When the egg cracks, it will threaten the galaxy entirely. When the Force itself sickens, the past and future must split and combine. A chosen one shall come, born of no father, and through him, ultimate balance in the Force will restore it. And so, this is a very important part, because we are getting the full prophecy of the Chosen One. Should I read it again? Just to give them a better idea?
I mean, if you want to
I'll read it again for you guys. Only through sacrifice of many Jedi will the Order cleanse the sin done to the Nameless. The danger of the past is not the past, but sleeps in an egg. When the egg cracks, it will threaten the galaxy entirely. When the Force itself sickens, the past and the future must split and combine. A chosen one shall come, born of no father, and through him, ultimate balance in the Force will restore itself. Goosebumps. No, I just remember, like, this was such, like, a cool scene when we read it because we've never heard it like that.
Yeah.
This is the first time that you're reading the actual prophecy.
Yeah, and the prequels, they're almost just like, yeah, he's the chosen one.
Yeah.
But they don't really explain what that means.
Yeah, I don't even know if they ever recite the last part. Like they kind of say that last sentence broken up in different context of situations. Yeah. They talk about him being born of only no father, which they kind of don't talk about, but we hear Qui-Gon reference that when he's talking to Shmi. And then obviously the chosen one shall come. I mean, that's just a regular sentence, and through him ultimate balance will restore itself. So like we've seen that broken up a lot, but not written as well as that is. But
yeah, so we jump back to
we jump again.
Yeah, it's funny. Like you really got to pay attention reading some of these books. They jump, not even just this book. They jump in a lot of the books.
This book is bad.
Yeah. So we jump back to Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, and after the stuff with Fanry that happened, they decide to go on another scouting mission on the moon with Pax and Rahara. They find about 30 plus people that are in mining tunnels on the moon, like hiding. But they have like a bunch, you know how they have a bunch of sensors and stuff like that. They use the sensors to see if there has been any like traveling happening.
So what he's explaining is that the ship that Pax has is kind of like a normal ship, but he spends a ton of money revamping this ship.
Yeah.
And so basically what you learn is that they're the ones who shot the anti-plasma shot. And so like he has anti-plasma missiles. He has these systems, and he has these different devices that do like incredibly good work. They can completely like take themselves off of scanners.
Yeah.
They have like almost a cloaking device. And then they have this ability he can like detect different minerals based off of where they are on the planet and stuff. And so they at this point have detected that there's 30 people or so hiding in mining tunnels, and that there's been no air traffic in the area. Mm-hmm. Which means that the performers on the moon definitely didn't try to assassinate the princess because she lives on the planet. Mm-hmm. No one's left from moon to planet. But that also could mean that the opposition has operatives that are on the planet and maybe even in the palace.
Right. Yeah, so that's a problem. The hunt's about to take place, and they have Obi-Wan like guard the princess. Yeah, so Obi-Wan is basically just watching out for the princess, and the princess just has a million questions for Obi-Wan, right?
She's a child. She's like 13.
Yeah,
12.
she just starts asking a bunch of questions, and she's like, "What's that?" Or just a bunch of stuff like that.
No.
So basically, they get to a point where she's talking about the lightsaber, and Obi-Wan decides to completely disassemble his lightsaber, and she's like, "What's this? What's that? What's that doing? What's this glowy thing?
Yeah. What's that rock?
It looks kind of blue." She's referring to the Kyber crystal. And then Obi-Wan goes to explain that they have their Kyber crystals. They have to bond with it. And as he's explaining everything, she interrupts him to be like, "Oh, what's this mean?" She's like, "So you guys talk to it?" And Obi-Wan's like, "No, like."
We have a bond through the Force, not through friendship.
Yeah, so she sees like a little like blue tint with it, which is because Obi-Wan's lightsaber is blue. So she questions if like all Jedi lightsabers are blue, which obviously isn't the case. And then he goes on to explain there's blue, green, and then sometimes even purple. And she was like, "Purple? Did you wish for purple?" It was really like you could actually see in the scene how young Fanry really is. She's like, "Did you wish for purple? I would have wished for purple."
Yeah, and so then we get a very important scene. Fanry asks if they use lightsabers in combat against other Jedi, and or if against anybody else with a lightsaber. And Obi-Wan explains that no, they don't. Well, other than like the Sith, but like they've been extinct for over a millennium. Sorry.
Yeah, so Fanry also questions that on top of it and be like, well, what if there was a conflict within the Jedi? And he's like, there isn't. And she's like, but what if there was? And it was really weird. She got like super serious all of a sudden. She was like, but what if there was?
It was kind of like a little kid telling a campfire story.
Yeah, and trying to be scary about it. It was really interesting.
But so this next scene is a jump. We jump to Pax. And basically, not like this scene's not that important, but it's important. So Pax decides that since they have all these colon crystals that they got and they're not kyber crystals, they might as well try to like scam the Zerka Corporation, just sell them as kyber crystals. And Rahara does not like this idea because she does not want to be involved with Zerka. She hates Zerka, and they're slavers. Like, she doesn't want this. And basically Pax is like, well, we can sell them to them and rip them off. So like we can sell them for kyber amount or kyber value and or close to kyber value, and then we can just basically rob them without robbing them. So he basically goes aboard the ship, he takes the colon crystals, and he sells them to Zerka as kyber crystals. And he made, it's not stated, but he made a large amount of money. He basically said that we could upgrade the entire ship and take a couple years of vacation before they had to go out and mine again or steal. But
Yeah, so we jump again.
yeah, jumping back to Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon.
Yeah, so
It's a fun little book.
Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon are preparing for the hunt, and they are going to be riding an animal, and it's called a Varactyl.
You know what fractals are, but you might not know. So, if any of you guys have seen the beloved Revenge of the Sith, Obi-Wan rides a fractal in that movie.
Yeah.
He on the planet of Utapau, which I might explain at some point. I don't remember, but basically on Utapau, when he's fighting General Grievous, he gets on that green lizard, basically, and it makes that really high-pitched screeching noise. That's what they're riding.
Yeah.
So you can go ahead.
Yeah, and Obi-Wan, I feel like it doesn't get talked about a whole
Oh,
lot.
I did. I was at the wrong.
Yeah,
part.
I was like,
I'm
it's
I'm
literally
an idiot.
right there. Like, anyway.
I can read it if you want, or if you want to.
No, it's fine. But yeah, so basically Obi-Wan, I feel like has a connection to like animals that they don't particularly cover
He
a whole lot.
has a weird connection with nature.
Yeah.
Which we see in the Padawan book that
Yeah.
we've also already talked about.
I guess we did
He
talk
has
about
this
that already.
weird connection with nature, and I honestly believe it's just because he's such a sound person.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that he has issues with are like anxiety issues from himself
Yeah.
because he doesn't think he's going to be good enough.
Yeah, so he basically is like talking to the Varactyl, but like not like speaking out loud. He's kind of using the Force, talking to it, being like, "Is it okay if I like get on your back and stuff like that? Like, is it okay for me to ride you?" And
That'd be a crazy question.
yeah, but jeez.
Anyway, basically they're explaining that years ago they would hunt live animals, but they've hunted them for so long that there isn't that many, so they actually hunt a droid.
Yeah.
Which is, I thought was weird, but
So yeah, they start the hunt.
I realized that was that type of...
Yeah. Obi-Wan and Fanry's Varactyls are a lot faster than the other people's. And Obi-Wan kind of has like the thought with himself, like these used to be like, I'm pretty sure he talks about them used to be like racing animals that they would use. I'm pretty sure that's a...
He described them as close to riding and like being in a race, I think, yeah.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden, someone jumps out from the bushes. There's just open fire, like on Princess
So this
Fanry.
is like a weird scene because, like what he said, they take off and like Qui-Gon's Varactyl is very fast, and obviously Fanry probably has the best Varactyl on the planet because she's the monarch. But basically, like Qui-Gon and Rail are also on Varactyls. They're also part of the hunt, but like they get to a point where they have to jump over a canyon, and their Varactyls went hell no, and like Obi-Wan's and them just jumped over it.
Yeah.
And so as you were saying.
Yeah, so Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon, and Rail like immediately like, go into defensive mode. Like, we need to get this situated. Qui-Gon goes and for the attacker to see what's going on, and he notices that's one of the droids, the prey droids that they're hunting for the hunt. But the problem is they realized that it's not a prey anymore. It became a predator, and they were kind of confused on why
It was directly shooting at Fanry.
Yeah. Basically, Qui-Gon just cut it down, and it was over. Yeah. So basically, after that was over, they kind of just took a moment to like make sure Fanry was okay, calm her down. And Qui-Gon was like, he feels like the preparation and like the surroundings, like the security was really good. So they don't understand how it would have been like, how this droid just all of a sudden started opening fire.
And this is a private conversation that legitimately has like Qui-Gon, Rail, Fanry. And Obi-Wan might be there. I'm not entirely sure. I think he was. But basically they come to like Qui-Gon comes to the conclusion for them that like someone from within the palace is the one that's sabotaging these events, which was a shock for Fanry and Rail because they can't imagine anybody doing that within the palace. So this is kind of where we're going to stop for right now. This book is not necessarily very long, but there's just a lot of small details. So this is going to be at least 2, maybe 3 episodes.
Yeah.
We're going to try to make it 2. But so that's all that we got for this week. This book's going to get even more crazy, interesting, and it's going to jump back and forth a lot. So this has been My Trick Media. Thanks.